Hello, my name is Kelly Clark, and this is my AEP 880 Module 7 case study about family involvement. All right, looking at the case summary here, the people that we have involved is the teacher, Mr. Rolnick, we have Joel, the student, we have Mr. and Mrs. Pham, Joel's parents, and we have Miss Smith, who is a veteran teacher. The situation that we have on our hands here is, as a teacher, Mr. Rolnick believes that family involvement is an integral to student success and works hard to provide opportunities for all parents to be involved. Yet Mr. and Mrs. Pham have not taken part in any of these opportunities to get involved. So the issues that we're seeing here is that Mr. and Mrs. Pham have declined opportunities to be more actively involved in their son's education despite Mr. Rolnick's attempts to make it easier. The problem here that we have at hand is Mr. Rolnick is discouraged that he is not able to get Mr. and Mrs. Pham more involved, especially with his latest attempt in trying to have a meeting with them about Joel partnering up with another student for a project. So the concern is Mr. Rolnick feels that he does not have a positive relationship with this family and that this could potentially be a concern in Joel's academic success. So the first question that we had was, Mr. Rolnick provided various opportunities for students' parents to volunteer, but Mrs. and Mr. Pham did not volunteer in these ways. Ms. Smith suggested that one reason for their lack of participation might be their own experience as students in school. So looking at that, what are some factors that might be keeping them from volunteering? Well, Miss Smith just kind of enlightened us a little bit about maybe that they had a bad experience when they went to school, going to school years prior to maybe their culture being from a Vietnamese background, and kind of there not being as many of that population in the school at the time, kind of left, they had some bad experiences or didn't feel like they fit in, or maybe people left them out. And so that could be hindering them or keeping them from wanting to come to the school. And Miss Smith also mentioned that some of the same people that were on staff when they were in school are still on staff today. So that could also be making them feel uncomfortable. And just the cultural differences about parental involvement in school. We don't know always if all cultures want the parents to be involved the way that we like for parent engagement to happen in educational settings. So really understanding those cultural differences and backgrounds that people might come from for when they grew up, maybe their parents were not at all involved and there wasn't any kind of family engagement with schools. Kids went to school, parents went to work or stayed at home and took care of it, and there was a definite division there. We don't know that. So just making sure that we understand some of those cultural differences, and then just clear up any misunderstandings or assumptions that we might be making. Mr. Rolnick was making some assumptions, we know, about Mr. and Mrs. Pham, and why he thought they were not participating, and then assuming that they were disinterested. But we also don't know, maybe they were making some assumptions about the school or about Mr. Rolnick, and we need to clear up any misunderstandings that they might have and just have that open communication between the school and the family. Some personal experiences that I've had is we do have a large German Mennonite family culture in our school. And so with that culture, there is a language barrier. They have an unwritten language that they speak, and so that is difficult when it comes to translating things if we want to send home letters and things like that. So we have to understand or know, can they read maybe a High German or a different German than what they speak? And some of them can have some Spanish background, and so is Spanish a language that would be a good translation to use for them? So just understanding that language barrier, and because they're all migrant people that come over here, and knowing kind of where they came from. Some have come from Canada, some have come from Mexico. And you just don't really know where they've stopped and then came to us. So understanding what that barrier is and then how to best overcome that. They definitely are a working class, very hardworking people, and so their work schedule can be very demanding. And difficult for them to get off during the work day. And a lot of times the families are very large, so the mothers may be at home, but they are attending to several children. So understanding those schedules as well. And just the value of education. A lot of them have a limited education background. They've either went to private or parochial schools and only until 8th grade. And some of them haven't gone to school at all and maybe have very limited reading and writing skills. And so understanding that as well to try to help overcome those barriers. And then also their religious holidays are different than a lot of the ones that we celebrate. And so there are some days that those students miss schools to observe some of their religious holidays that are not regularly days that we get off. And so understanding that and being sensitive to that as well. Okay, the next question said, how should Mr. Rolnick and other teachers and administrators reach out to parents and other caretakers who might have experienced school as a hostile environment when they were students? Well, here's a couple of things that I come up with. First of all, we can communicate. We need to communicate our school policies openly, share the changes that have been made in the school culture over the years, make sure that we send home positive notes and communicate often with families, and then ask parents how they would like to be involved. The next thing that we can do is we can act upon the policies and ensure that all school personnel is following them and that they are positively contributing to the desired school culture that we are wanting to create. And then also allow parents opportunities to ask questions, just making sure to give them the time to ask those questions in a safe place to be able to do that. And then also respect, just make for sure that we acknowledge and we accept their differences and that we have respect for that. And then the final one that I have here is educate. We can educate all stakeholders on how race and ethnicity can affect minority groups and ways that we can break down those barriers. So continuing on with that question, some personal experiences that I have. I've had some parents that put limitations on their child that mirrored their limitation in school. And so they just feel like if they weren't good at something in school, then their kid automatically isn't going to be good at that in school. And I hear statements like, well, I was never good at math, or I was never good at spelling, or I always hated reading in school, so that's why my kid is this way. And so kind of trying to maybe change that mindset. So maybe not so much that it was hostile, but because they felt like they weren't successful in an area in school, that their kid isn't going to be successful. We have lots of families with limited education, like I mentioned before, and language barriers. And so just helping them through that. Some of them, it might be the first time that they've really been in a public education setting. And so that can be a little bit intimidating, and just doing what we can to make them feel comfortable and inviting them in and letting them know that we want them here. Families that live several miles away or work far away. We have some families that maybe live or work anywhere between 30 and 50 miles away from the school. And so if they're working that far or traveling that far to go to work, it's going to be really hard to make some of the things that are happening during the school day. So just understanding what their schedule is when it comes to that as well. How would the staff know about these barriers? Well, again, staff development and communication is key. We have to provide time for staff to discuss the culture that surrounds the school and the community, and provide intentional talking points for staff so that they can learn from one another. Like in this situation, Ms. Smith knew something that Mr. Wolnick didn't, but if maybe some of these conversations were happening on a regular and consistent basis, then Mr. Rolnick might have been aware of what some of the other teachers had learned previously, and then that way the families also don't feel like they're starting over every single year with a new teacher, but that there's some continuity and they can just continue growing versus always going back to square one. And then also in our sit teams and our sit meetings, we can have some more of those personalized conversations and have some time that's just with that family, and then a larger staff group, and we can ask those questions and allow time for parents to ask questions as well. How could you eliminate this situation from happening? Well, again, make sure that staff is aware of the school and community demographics and known barriers that exist. Allow time for consistent collaboration, and ensure that ongoing professional development is provided on diversity and equity. So the third question that we were asked to respond to, Mr. Rolnick appeared to assume, because they didn't take advantage of family involvement opportunities that he created, that Mr. and Mrs. Pham were disinterested in their son's education. So what are some ways that parents can be involved and demonstrate interest in their children's education other than volunteering at school? Well, you could watch and see, are they attending events, back to school nights, music concerts, sporting events, plays, parent-teacher conferences, different things like that. Some of our parents, and we do have this happening, where we get a lot of donations. Maybe they aren't somebody that can come physically to the school, but they have provided donations, or they've been willing to participate in fundraising events and maybe take that fundraiser, if they're traveling 30 or 50 miles, it could be a completely different group of people than just all the ones that we always hit in our small community. And so they've helped out a lot with fundraising events and reaching out to, a larger population of people. And then also, are they helping with their students' homework? Do you feel like they're involved in when it comes to homework? And then communicating with the teacher, are they responding back? Have we found a way to communicate? And is that kind of two-way communication happening? And then just continuing on with that question, it just went on any personal experiences that I've had. Well, I think some things that we need to think about are single parents with multiple children. Sometimes it's really hard for them to be involved and come up to the school if they are a single parent and they have other kids that they have to tend to at home as well. They can't really leave them with somebody, and so that could be a struggle. So that might be something to think about, and we do obviously have that situation at our school. Parents with health issues. I did have a parent that had a very weak immune system, and so coming into the school, she did not feel safe, coming into the school building, and so being aware if there's any health conditions or things that might be keeping parents from coming to the school. We also have some elderly guardians or grandparents that are raising the kids, and sometimes they just are not comfortable coming into the school setting. And then I also mentioned the German culture, and again, some of them, this is the first time that they've been involved with public education. They didn't go to a public school, if they even attended a school. And so just again being welcoming and explaining to them and knowing that it's definitely a growing process. I think something else that I wanted to mention about the German culture is when I was in school, because I teach in the same school that I graduated from, that many of the German Mennonites went to their own school, and it was usually just in somebody's house, and one of the moms would take on teaching them, to where they started coming to public school and going to 8th grade. Then they kind of started trickling into high school, and now we have most of them going to high school, and now we've had a couple go on to college and even have played collegiate sports, and so we've made great gains, and we're starting to see more and more of those family members coming to events and getting engaged and involved in the school. So I think we've grown a lot in that area, but we still have a lot of growth to do. And I feel like that kind of mirrors Mr. Rolnick. If we have new teachers coming into the district and they're not aware of this situation, or they haven't been able to see the kind of growth that I've been able to see, we need to be having those conversations and letting them know and understand how this culture has really grown, and how unique they are to our community and what they have brought and offered, because they have just really made our community bloom and blossom with the businesses and the trades and the things that they do in our community, and they're a very vital culture, and have just really made us prosper. And so we want to make sure that we embrace that, and